I didn't cry the day my life broke apart. I cried 3 days later, standing alone in a grocery store aisle holding a box of cereal I couldn't afford anymore. That's how heartbreak really works. It doesn't always come with screaming or dramatic goodbyes. Sometimes it arrives quietly, when no one is watching, when the world keeps moving and you're the only one frozen. You might be listening to this while driving home from work, or lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling. Or maybe you're smiling in front of everyone, while inside, something feels empty. If that's you, this story is for you. Because this isn't a story about being perfect, it's a story about being human. Let me introduce myself. My name is Arav. I'm not famous, I'm not rich, I'm not special. I'm just someone who loved deeply and lost everything because of it. And what hurts the most isn't the loss, it's realizing how much of yourself you gave away before you noticed you were disappearing. I grew up believing that love fixed everything. My parents fought constantly: money, responsibilities, dreams that never happened. But every night, no matter how loud the arguments were, my mother would still make dinner. My father would still sit at the table. And for a moment, things felt normal. That's where I learned it. The idea that if you love enough, you endure enough, you'll be rewarded. No one tells you that sometimes endurance breaks you. I met Mira when I was 24. She was standing at the bus stop arguing with the driver about a missing ticket. Her voice wasn't angry, it was playful, confident, alive. I remember thinking, she doesn't know she's beautiful. When the bus finally left, she laughed at herself. That laugh, soft, unguarded, stayed with me. I offered to help her find another route. She smiled and said, "Only if you promise not to disappear halfway." That was the first promise I made to her, and the first one I kept until I couldn't anymore. Our relationship didn't start like a movie. There were no fireworks, just long conversations, cheap street food, missed calls, and shared dreams. She wanted to travel. I wanted stability. She talked about the future like it was an adventure. I talked about it like it was something to be built carefully, brick by brick. We thought we were balancing each other. We didn't realize we were slowly pulling in opposite directions. Before I go further, let me pause for just a moment. If this story already feels familiar, if it reminds you of someone you loved, someone you lost, or a version of yourself you don't recognize anymore, please like this video. It helps this story reach others who need it. And subscribe to the channel, because the journey ahead is painful, honest, and eventually healing. Now, let me continue. The first year with Mira was beautiful. We celebrated small victories. First promotions, first savings, first apartment with peeling paint and a broken fan. We promised each other something simple. No matter how hard life gets, we talk. We don't disappear. But life doesn't attack all at once. It starts with delays, then misunderstandings, then exhaustion. My job demanded more hours. Her dreams demanded more freedom. I started coming home tired. She started going out alone. At first, it didn't bother me. I told myself, this is love, giving space. But space can turn into distance without warning. She would tell me stories about people she met. I would nod while checking emails. She would wait for me to ask questions. I wouldn't notice the silence growing between us. That silence became a habit. The first real crack came on a Sunday afternoon. She asked me, "Do you still see me?" I laughed. "Of course I do. You're right here." She didn't laugh back. "I mean, do you still see who I'm becoming?" I didn't have an answer. Because the truth was, I was too busy trying to survive to watch her evolve. And love doesn't survive neglect. That night, I lay awake beside her. She slept facing away from me. I wanted to reach out. I didn't know how. That's the cruel thing about emotional distance. It doesn't come from hatred, it comes from fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of admitting you're failing, fear of realizing you might already be too late. The breakup didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly, over weeks of quiet dinners, over messages left unread, over dreams that stopped being shared. One evening, she said, "I feel lonely even when I'm with you." That sentence shattered something in me, because I loved her. But love isn't enough when understanding disappears. The day she left, there was no drama. She packed a small bag, left a note on the table. "I don't hate you. I just can't keep shrinking to fit a life that isn't growing." I read that note over and over. I didn't chase her. I didn't beg. I just sat there and realized I had lost not only her, but myself. The weeks after were worse. Friends stopped calling. Work felt meaningless. Even music hurt. I replayed every moment, searching for the exact place where everything went wrong. But heartbreak doesn't give you a map. It just leaves you standing in ruins, asking why you didn't see the collapse coming. One night, sitting alone on the floor, I asked myself something terrifying. Who am I without her? And I didn't know the answer. That was the lowest point of my life, not because I was alone, but because I didn't recognize the person I had become trying not to be. Yet, this isn't where the story ends. This is where it begins. Because sometimes losing someone is the only way to find yourself. And in part 2, something unexpected happens. Something that forces me to face my mistakes, my fears, and the version of love I misunderstood. If you've ever loved someone deeply, if you've ever lost yourself trying to keep someone else, they don't tell you what happens after heartbreak. They talk about crying, they talk about loneliness, they talk about missing someone. But they don't talk about the silence that comes after the tears dry. The kind of silence where you wake up and forget for 1 second that your life has changed, and then it hits you again. Harder. After Mira left, days stopped having meaning. I woke up because the alarm rang, not because I wanted to live another day. I ate because my body demanded it, not because I felt hunger. I spoke to people without hearing my own voice. I wasn't depressed in a dramatic way. I was empty in a quiet one. And that quiet almost destroyed me. The apartment felt haunted. Her mug still sat in the cabinet, her scarf still hung behind the door, her laughter still echoed in places where silence now lived. Every object felt like an accusation. You didn't try hard enough. You didn't listen. You noticed too late. I thought about texting her every single day. I never did. Not because I didn't love her, but because I finally understood something painful. Love that has to beg is already broken. One evening, after work, I found myself sitting on a park bench watching people pass by. Couples holding hands, parents chasing children, strangers laughing at nothing. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere. I didn't. And for the first time, instead of blaming her, I blamed myself. Not for losing her, but for losing me long before she left. I realized something uncomfortable. I had been living on autopilot. I didn't ask myself what I wanted. I didn't protect my boundaries. I didn't grow. I just endured. I thought sacrifice was love, but sacrifice without balance is self-erasure. That night, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a motivational speech one, just a quiet promise to myself. I will not disappear again. I didn't know how to rebuild a life, but I knew I had to start somewhere. The first step was painful. I went to therapy. Saying that out loud still feels strange. Where I come from, you don't talk about feelings, you survive them. But survival had left me hollow. So I sat across from a stranger and admitted things I had never said out loud. I'm scared of being alone.
I don't know who I am without being needed. I think love with suffering." She listened. She didn't judge. And slowly, painfully, I started listening to myself. Healing isn't cinematic. It doesn't happen in montages. It happens in small, uncomfortable moments. Like learning to sit with silence. Like cooking for one and not feeling ashamed. Like saying no without explaining yourself. I started going on walks without my phone, reading books I had abandoned, sleeping without waiting for a message that would never come. Some nights were worse than others, but the bad nights stopped feeling endless. Months passed. I didn't notice the change at first, but one morning I caught myself humming while making coffee. That's when I realized I was breathing again. I met Anaya on a random Thursday, not on a dating app, not through friends, at a bookstore. She was standing in the philosophy section, arguing with a shelf label. I smiled without meaning to. She noticed. "What?" she asked. "This shelf doesn't stand a chance," I said. She laughed. Not politely, not carefully, freely. That laugh felt familiar but not dangerous. We talked for 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. She didn't ask what I did for a living first, she asked what kept me awake at night. I told her the truth. "Regret," I said. She nodded. "Yeah, that one's loud." I didn't fall for her immediately, and that mattered. There was no rush, no intensity, no fear of losing her before having her. We met again, then again, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to sit quietly. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't demand pieces of me I wasn't ready to give. She met me where I was, and that scared me more than heartbreak ever did, because real connection doesn't feel chaotic. It feels steady. And when you're used to pain, peace feels unfamiliar. One night after dinner, she asked me something simple. "What are you afraid of?" I thought before answering. "I'm afraid of becoming invisible again," I said. She didn't rush to respond. "I won't let you disappear," she said softly, "but you have to stay present too." That sentence stayed with me, because for the first time, love wasn't about holding on, it was about showing up. Still, part of me held back, not because of her, but because of the past. I hadn't forgiven myself yet. And then one day, unexpectedly, I ran into Mira at a cafe. She looked different, happier, lighter. So did I. We talked. Awkward at first, then honest. She apologized, I did too. And in that moment, something inside me finally loosened. Not because we would get back together, but because we didn't need to. Closure isn't about answers, it's about acceptance. That night, I realized something profound. Mira wasn't the love of my life. She was the lesson that taught me how to love without losing myself. And lessons don't stay forever. They stay long enough to change you. When I told Anaya about my past, she listened, not with suspicion, not with insecurity, with understanding. "I'm not competing with your memories," she said. "I'm building something new with you." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a rebound. This was growth. But life doesn't test you once. It tests you again when you think you've learned. And in part 3, everything is put on the line. A choice between fear and trust, a moment where old patterns try to return, and a decision that defines what love truly means. The ending will be happy, but not because life becomes perfect, because I become whole.
People think healing ends when you stop crying. It doesn't. Healing ends when you stop abandoning yourself to keep someone else. And I learned that lesson on a day that almost made me lose everything again. Anaya and I had been together for almost a year. Not the loud, dramatic kind of love people post online, the quiet kind. Morning coffee together, shared grocery lists, inside jokes no one else understood. We argued sometimes, but we talked more. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was performing love. I was living it. But just because you've healed doesn't mean fear disappears.
It waits, patiently. The opportunity came suddenly. A job offer, abroad. Better money, more recognition, the kind of opportunity you're told you should take. Old me wouldn't have hesitated. Stability over connection, achievement over emotion. But this time, my first thought wasn't excitement. It was fear. Not of losing the job, of losing us. I didn't tell Anaya immediately, and that was my first mistake. Because silence, the kind I once lived in, has consequences. She noticed the distance. She didn't accuse me, she didn't demand answers, she just asked softly, "Where did you go?" That question hit harder than any argument ever could, because I knew I had gone back to my old pattern, handling things alone, disappearing emotionally to protect myself. That night, I sat alone, staring at my phone. I could feel the old version of me returning, the version that thought love meant choosing everything except yourself, or choosing yourself at the cost of love. I had spent years believing those were the only two options. They weren't. I remembered something my therapist once said. Love isn't about sacrifice, it's about alignment. I realized something terrifying. If I didn't speak now, honestly, vulnerably, I would lose Anaya the same way I lost Mira. Not because she would leave, but because I would slowly vanish. So I told her everything, not carefully, not perfectly, honestly. The job, the fear, the old habits, the part of me that still doubted I could have love and growth. She listened, longer than I expected. Then she said something that changed everything. "I don't want you to stay for me," she said, "but I won't beg you to choose me either." I nodded, because this wasn't about convincing her, it was about choosing myself without losing her. We didn't decide that night. We didn't need to. For the first time, uncertainty didn't feel like danger. It felt like space to decide together. The next few weeks were heavy, not sad, intentional. We talked about our fears, our goals, our limits. I admitted something I had never admitted before. I'm scared that if I choose love, I'll lose myself again. She held my hand and said, "And I'm scared that if you choose fear, you already have." That sentence settled something inside me, because love doesn't ask you to disappear, fear does. I turned down the job, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't aligned with the life I was building, and for the first time in my life, that decision didn't feel like loss, it felt like self-respect. Months later, something unexpected happened. Another opportunity, this time local, flexible, meaningful. I smiled when the offer came in, not because of the money, but because I didn't feel torn. That's when I knew I had changed. One evening, sitting on the balcony, Anaya asked me a question. "Do you think everything happens for a reason?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said, "but I think we can choose meaning from what happens." She smiled, and in that smile, I saw peace. Not excitement, not chaos. Peace. I thought about Mira, about the person I was back then. I didn't feel regret anymore, just gratitude. Because without that loss, I would never have learned how to stay, how to speak, how to love without disappearing. The proposal wasn't dramatic. No crowd, no cameras, just the two of us. I didn't get on one knee immediately. I looked at her and said, "I won't promise perfection." She laughed. "Good, I don't want it." "I promise presence," I said. "I promise honesty. I promise not to vanish when things get hard." She didn't cry. She smiled and said, "That's all I've ever wanted." Marriage didn't change everything. Life still happens. Bad days still come. But now, when things get hard, we sit together. We talk. We stay. And that, more than love, is what saved me. Sometimes I think back to that grocery store aisle, to the version of me holding a box of cereal, wondering how everything fell apart. I wish I could go back and tell him this: "You're not broken. You're becoming." If you're listening to this and your heart feels heavy, if you've lost someone or lost yourself, or you're afraid that loving means disappearing, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. The right love doesn't ask you to shrink, it asks you to show up as you are. And when you do, that's when the happy ending begins. This story didn't end with fireworks, it ended with peace. And peace is the most honest happiness there is.